Well, welcome. My name is William Marsh. I'm the Director of Clinical Education and Quantum Systems here at Premier Research Labs. And once again, I am joined with Nick Labinsky, our CEO, our master in command here at Premier Research Labs. And really, we're talking the microbiome, which honestly is something near and dear to your heart. And actually, before we get into these wonderful products that we wanted to showcase on today's episode, I actually wanted to talk about a little bit about your history with the microbiome. And you are an in-house microbiologist. So share with the viewers kind of your story and your journey with the microbiome, because now you're the CEO of Premier Research Labs. So that's quite a story, I'm sure, to tell.
Well, it started, 16 years ago, and actually we can go back even further. Went to UT, studied as a microbiologist. Actually was looking to go to medical school. Really it was a kind of Van Wilder. I was there quite a while because I went to do neurobiology as well, chemistry, Spanish, and I realized later that the medical school route was really a dream of my parents, not necessarily my dream. I was in love with the lab. I loved being in the lab, period. And so I decided, back in 2009, to finally just use my first degree. Go in there, I was waiting tables, bartending while I kept taking more classes, to just experience at least my first degree and see, go back to what I knew I loved. And that's when Dr. Marshall and Dr. Forbes found me on Craigslist and hired me on. And I was the microbiologist on staff in the quality control laboratory. So I was helping them go from no GMPs to GMPs being enforced in, I believe it was July 2009. That being said, I was helping them set up their quality control lab. And from there, I moved upwards in my career to product development, where I got to do a lot of research with fermentation. We've been doing fermentation for over 20 years. So Dr. Marshall was a pioneer to start fermenting different botanicals, different items to give it that life force, right? And fermentation, people have known, and for thousands of years it was healthy, from yogurts, fermenting foods to preserve them. It was good for the body. So kind of, you could say, we co-evolved with fermentation. Probiotics and just bacteria in general, we're a symbiotic organism. There is literally trillions of different bacterial cells everywhere. From your eyes, you're covered in it. You don't even realize it. And people there's experiments in college where you wipe yourself in different areas and you plate it to see. And I'm telling you, something grows no matter where you do. Your eyeballs has a different microbiome for your eyes, and inside the blood too. People always say, "Oh, it's sterile," and I believe what they're realizing is there's a balance that your body does. If your immunity is out of whack, you can have issues. Where they're finding certain things in clots, like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, certain pathogens being lodged into the clots that shouldn't be there, because they're out. Like, if you get bacteria, the thought was, into your blood, you get sepsis, right? If you have a strong enough immune system, it should be able to balance it out. Plus, good bacteria have postbiotics that have that clinical effect. So I think we're really at the beginning of really understanding the temporal and causal effects of probiotics and how they work with you. But one thing I can say, you're a symbiotic organism. And one of the things we do know, that longevity is directly linked to fiber intake, which we believe, we don't know if it's the microbiome. We assume a healthy microbiome leads to health span and longevity. So these are things that I think has become common knowledge, and just there's enough research done that we say that. Now, exactly how it works, the mechanism action, I think is going to be very difficult for us to figure out, because there's so many different types of bacteria, different types of organisms in there, and it's a balance, right? Everything is in balance. Even there's parasites in you, there's viruses in you that live there. These viruses don't harm you. They work on the bacteria themselves, and some of them are good. They work on bad bacteria. Some are like E. coli. Some of them are bad. And not all E. coli is bad either. You're filled with E. coli too right now. Now, if you got the bad stuff like O157H7, that's a problem. That becomes where you get, basically bleeding within the intestines. So, it's very much a balance. My journey here as the microbiologist, I was helping set up the systems, the specs, and then really kind of helping design some of the formulas, such as Microbiome 18, which we have here today, one of my favorite products, which we'll go into a little bit later. And then helping to optimize the fermentation process itself with Dr. Marshall to help to produce higher levels of postbiotics, which is going to give you that gut health. And then also, the more activity, the better you're going to get some of this breakdown of these items that we're trying to make more bioavailable for you, such as like turmeric or milk thistle, or one of those items.
Yeah. I think it's important maybe to frame the conversation around microbiome health with an understanding of how people can really start to invest in their microbiome, right? I think, there's a lot of probiotics on the market, there's a lot of fiber products on the market. With your background and of course our philosophy, we really have that integral approach of saying, how are we really nourishing the microbiome? Because it is probably the most important relationship you have in your life.
Absolutely.
And so, there's a lot of important relationships, but the aspect of really how you're communing with the microbiome. Yeah. And so, in your perspective, would you maybe help for our viewers frame some opportunities that are easy opportunities for them to really get invested in their microbiome health?
Yeah, there's some no-cost items that are very easy to just, lifestyle affects you, your environment affects you, and we know this we talked this on the previous podcast, just, the thousands of, we talked about plastics in there. We don't actually know, I don't know if there's any research yet, I need to look into this about how the plastics affect the microbiome, but everything affects this world that lives inside of you. And when it gets out of balance, it will affect you directly because they're your tenants. And when the tenants get upset, they make it known. And whenever there's something that gets in there that shouldn't be, they have mechanisms to protect it. And if you have enough of the right good bacteria in there, it can actually prevent, a salmonella poisoning or or at least mitigate the risk. Enough of that can actually cause problems. But I think the simple things is, eating more fiber. I have to say, many people do not get anywhere near the fiber amounts, especially if they're just eating a Western diet. If you're not eating, the fruits and vegetables, but even then, you have to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables to get the amount of fiber you need. Beans, legumes are probably one of the best items you could do. Always add those to nuts. There's ways to get there. You can get up there pretty quickly, actually, if you really look at how your diet is planned out. But there's simple solutions. Literally walking after your meal can help with altering your microbiome. And this walking, literally, if you eat, go for a 10, 15-minute walk. It not only helps you digest, but it can actually alter the microbiome state. Food itself, just realize, we can take probiotics all day, and people need that, especially if they have acute issues. They need to either dysbiosis, overgrowth, they need it to regulate the system. But food can change your microbiome literally in a day, whatever you eat. And your microbiome changes with your circadian rhythms. So it actually changes based on when you eat meals. So if you're intermittent fasting, especially before, like let's say you're transitioning into intermittent fasting, you haven't been doing it, there's periods you're hungry. Your microbiome at that point when you normally eat is different than the point when you don't eat. So it's literally a living world that is going along with you to help benefit you, but it's also, think of it as an animal that knows when it needs to be there and be ready to consume the food that you're going to put in there, because it's relying on you to nourish it. So if you take care of it, it will take care of you. And it produces compounds in there, from everything from GABA to glutathione to vitamins, if you have the right ecology. Now, if you're just eating, ultra-processed foods, items that have no nutritional benefit, even juices, right, which are good for, vitamins and stuff like that, but all the fiber's gone. So that doesn't help the bacteria, right? It's got to be very quickly absorbed into the bloodstream, and then, you're not going to feed those bacteria. They're going to starve. And the ones that are beneficial tend to starve first. And so I think the very simple things you could do from just, everybody says exercise, but even that, just go walk. Just walk right after your meal. So simple, 15 minutes, walk around the block or wherever you live, just go walk for 15, 20 minutes. It will change your health. It's also good for exercise, right? There's a whole different podcast on that. Eating some fiber. Stress. Microbiome is very close to stress in terms of it can actually, because of the vagus nerve and how it connects to the brain, and because it actually you produce different compounds in your intestine, can affect your stress, but also outside factors. And if you don't mitigate that, it's a two-way road, and it can literally alter the ecology. So I think mitigating these things, and this is what everybody says: you got to mitigate stress, you need to exercise more, you need to eat more fiber. It's so true. I hate to say it, but they don't have to be crazy expensive either. I mean, literally, just go walking costs no money if you're able to, right? The beans fairly cheap, so you don't. I mean, just eating a half a cup of beans. I think I want to say one study over a year's time said that it was like the equivalent to running, so a certain amount every day. So just in terms of the health benefits. And that's just in terms of certain markers, not necessarily cardiovascular health. But that being said, there's simple things you could do, and I think this is foundational because nobody's perfect. I can tell you, I'm not here eating beans every day. I don't have them completely paired. I wish I did. I would love to. But you use these to help adjunct that diet that maybe it's not completely perfect. If you're doing nothing, you need to make some changes other places, because you're literally just you're actually causing issues in the gut. You're using this to help it, but it's a constant battle. And eventually, this may not be effective enough if you constantly put just more and more toxins, lack of fiber into the body. It'll be a big problem. And fiber does so many other things too, in terms of metabolic health, and it's just fiber is key. I would start with that too. If you can't even do the walking, just start with fiber. Go there.
I think it's important, there's a lot of really good nuggets that you highlighted, but it's important that, as a consumer or a health practitioner, you are, aware of eliminatory patterns with your clients, right? Or, if you're a client yourself, looking at your eliminatory patterns, understanding how they're changing over time, because you pointed out your microbiome is evolving. It's probably the most rapidly evolving piece of your system every day. And there's aspects to where your life changes and your biome changes with you. And so before we get into the product, I just wanted to echo sentiment on the facet of kind of that emotional disposition when you're eating a meal and how you're actually ingesting the food. We talked about frequencies and like that emotional grounding essence when you're consuming a meal is so important for integration, right? And that harmonization with the foods that you're consuming. But, just to echo your point further, the immune factors, the signaling patterns, the neuroinflammation, I mean, there's all these, longevity, metabolic kind of health facets where really if you focus on the biome, focus on gut health, focus on digestion, you really can start to correct the entire ecosystem of the body. So,
absolutely, and this is why Dr. Marshall was so adamant. Like, the one thing, if you did anything, you worked on digestion, which help with gut health, getting the food to be properly digested so you can actually put it in the form that can be, used by the bacteria too. If you don't fully digest your food, it becomes a problem then for you to absorb the nutrients. And some nutrients have to be modified by the bacteria before it's even really absorbed, or there's a beneficial compound that comes out of it. Certain things like turmeric turns into tetrahydrocurcumin, which has a different metabolic effect, and them together with curcumin is a very powerful combination that only happens when it's fermented by the bacteria itself in your gut. So you have to make sure it's in a form that can be digested, and that's why he was always saying taking HCl, take a digest with every meal, especially as you get over 30, because you lose HCl in terms of the pH of your acid in your stomach tends to go up, which means less digestion, less activation of the enzymes. So taking that together, I think, is essential as well, and an easy way to help with just overall health.
I mean, it's so critical to our philosophy, digestion, right? And whole foods. I mean, you can't really change health outcomes without focusing on digestion, especially from a longevity space. And I feel like everybody's going for the flashy, key, like silver bullet product. And truthfully, if you really ground yourself in digestion, lifestyle strategies, whole food strategies, integral supplement strategies that are foundational, you can really do a lot of good for the body. So actually, maybe let's talk about one of your favorite products, Microbiome 18. Just to kind of jump into that.
And actually, I'm going to talk about both kind of together, because I want to talk about what my protocol has been and my personal experience with my family. I'm not going to say which one, because in case he listens to this podcast, I don't want him to be embarrassed. But Microbiome 18, when I worked with Dr. Marshall to design this, the idea was to have a well-rounded, we need diversity. Having multiple different strains was very important, because they work at different parts of the gastrointestinal tract and how it supports you. So we tried to have pretty much every genus that was beneficial in there. One we didn't put in there for this was yeast, so there is no Saccharomyces boulardii in there due to certain allergen concerns with yeast. But that being said, it does have Bifidobacterium, it does have Lactobacillus, Lactococcus, Streptococcus, has also a spore former D111, which is clinically studied with over 30 different strains. Love that strain. Why? Safety profile from a spore former. The fact that it's been from 2 years old and up. My kids have been taking this since 2 years old. So this is something that I think it's great for kids to help them. Literally been proven to help with them to have a better ecology, actually improving the ratio of beneficial bacteria to non-beneficial bacteria. At least that's what we understand now. And also, it's been studied, some of the strains in here, for everything from reducing TNFA, tumor necrosis factor alpha, in athletes, so inflammation, to helping with immunity. So there's a slew of different studies that D111 has done. So it's a powerhouse, and there's about 5 billion in there. Very stable, so room temperature. We wanted to make sure it was so stable to have it outside the fridge, because sometimes you forget it, or maybe it's on your porch for a while. So we wanted to make sure it's highly stable. Has a delayed release capsule, of course. You don't need that with a D111, but all the other ones, Lactobacillus, Streptococcus, when it hits that stomach acid, it will degrade. There's methods to help with that. They're showing like yogurt and honey, right? There's something that can help with that. But once again, this delayed release will help it get through that point, allow the other bacteria to get out there to go there. So the microbiome, absolutely an awesome product, well-rounded, about 10 billion on the other one, total 15 billion CFU per capsule. The Premier Probiotic cap is a 14 different botanicals that have been fermented with 13 different strains. Now, these strains, actually it's 12 different strains, over 3 years. So think of it as a fermented food. We call it Premier Probiotic caps because there's probiotics in there, and you're going to notice that the CFU level is lower. Why? Because really the point of that product, it's a more gentle approach, live bacteria, but we also preform the postbiotics. So what are postbiotics? Postbiotics are the compounds that are produced by the bacteria when they're fed a certain substrate. So, butyrate is something that's made by certain bacteria that's used. That butyrate is actually what feeds the colon in the cells, but also has certain mood-altering effects. Overall, it's good for health. And that can't be produced unless you have that right bacteria and the right prebiotic, which is the food, put in there. So the fruits in there, the vegetables, so 14 different botanicals, fruits, vegetables, seaweeds, for 3 years, producing those postbiotics, still has the probiotics active in there, and it's in this matrix that is a fermented food. And fermented foods have been studied to be one of the most beneficial foods you can eat, along with like beans and stuff. So you should still eat sauerkraut, kimchi. You can ferment pickles. I personally ferment salsa. That's what I do. I'm probably going to make a video sometime to show you how I do it. It's very simple. I actually use our Microbiome team as a starter culture, and it's delicious. And also, they've known this for 1,000 years, it's a preservative, so that's also lasts forever. Because the bacteria, those postbiotics are actually, there's bacteriocins in there. In the probiotic, Premier Probiotic, there's a Enterococcus faecalis TH10 that produces a phenolic acid that is a powerful antimicrobial. Will kill MRSA, will kill C. diff. These are pathogens of concern and to human health. and it's been shown clinically to kill those. So it is a powerful, powerful postbiotic. So, and most probiotics produce these bacteriicids. Why? It's the mechanism to move out the other bacteria so it can have a home. And the problem, like I said earlier, in terms of the microbiome, is that you need to have a larger amount to do that. But if you take them together, you have the kind of the ammo, the postbiotics that would be formed once it's actually adhered to the cells within your intestine. Then it produces postbiotics. But I'm going to give you two first, clear it out, and then you have basically the microbiome 18 to colonize and to give you that diversity there. So I always say take these together as a combination protocol and take it at night. Why take it at night? Because you have a certain amount of transit time. Whatever you eat literally goes through you and is pushed through your intestines slowly. It's faster during the day. It slows down at night as you go to sleep. So taking it at night will have some very quick clinical effects, especially for regularity. This will help you get things moving, if you will. And the story I said about earlier about my family, there's somebody in my family, I'm not going to say who, but he had a infection in his artificial knee. So he had basically a knee replacement, and he got a staph infection in there from pseudo-gout. Basic crystals formed, and like I said, blood had some staph somehow got in there and adhered to it and grew. They had to do emergency removal of this. Basically, it's a whole insert. And when you do that, you have to be on antibiotic drip for 3 months. And you can imagine how that just destroys any kind of microbiome you have. And it also gives you horrible, horrible constipation, as you can imagine. And he was on like 5 probiotics. And I was like, are you taking ours? Like, it's my dad. And I said it. Oops, I may have to put that out. Well, maybe we'll leave it in there. But anyways, yeah, he told me, and he was like, no. I was like, why aren't you taking this? I was like, why, what? Like, do you know what we do? And so I just gave him some. I said, take this tonight, because he said all the stuff wasn't working for him. So take these tonight. Don't take the other ones. Take it as far as away from, because he was on. When you take it for 3 months, the drip, then you get into these, you have to take basically an antibiotic daily for life. So you're always on an antibiotic forever. That's the consequence of what happened, because you might be a carrier. And so I just said, take this as far away as you can from the administration of the antibiotic. And he did, and he called me, texted me. I had the text the next morning. He goes, that is the most powerful probiotic combination I've ever had, and thank you. So you can imagine we relieved him of what his pain was. So it's very powerful. You take it at night. Honestly, the research is very minimal out there, and we've been looking at this. Why? But once again, anecdotal, our own personal protocol that I tell people always to do. You take it at night. You'll see better effects. Now, that being said, I think these two in combination, they have multiple clinical strains, D111, I talked about Enterococcus. Also, the Bifidium bacterium, BB536, one of the most studied bifidobacterium out there, not only for kids to shorten cold durations, but also maintaining elderly immunity. So it's very well studied, absolutely awesome combination. You're getting over 30 different probiotics when you take both of these together. So, once again, that diversity. And so this is just the combination I do always recommend together. When we recommend it, I always say take at least 1 capsule of microbiome at night, and then take actually 2 to 3 of the Premier Probiotic Cap to really get it going. Do that for a week, and then you can go down to 1 capsule and 1 capsule. And I would always just take it that way as a maintenance dose. You don't need a high dosage of the Premier Probiotic Cap once you get basically the cell adhesion, because that peristalsis will slow down. It will adhere to the cell wall. You'll start get those clinical effects from there, and hopefully support whatever you're trying to help in your system.
Yeah, there's just so many good nuggets that you outlined there. I feel that that was a wealth of just knowledge of how to use those products. But one thing that I do want to point out is the aspect of, you're really supporting biodiversity with the Probiotic
Absolutely.
Premier and the Microbiome 18. But, when we're thinking about whole food strategies and how you can really support diversity in the gut, one of my favorite adages is, how are you consuming 30 or more different foods in a given week, right? And that's like fruits and vegetables, and thinking about, all the different things you can have in your fridge to really okay, one day I'm going to have broccoli and then celery and then carrots and beans, and how do you get to 30? Well, taking a probiotic Premier that has those botanical compounds that have been fermented, I mean, that's just a quick bump to your baseline, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to start thinking in that regard, because that's going to allow all those post-fermentation metabolites in the gut that really supports the stability and the integrity of the colon for longevity, right?
Yeah.
And so just beautiful in regards to
Yeah, and realize everything you eat, anything you put in your body, even it's in your mouth, will affect your microbiome. So realize it's not just the items we tell you. If you eating that piece of pizza, the Twinkie, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go take a piece of fruit. Realize the other things are still there. They don't cancel each other out. That doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. You like to have balance, and I'm not saying be a neurotic either, like just to give up everything. I think that's that leads to failure. You tell anybody just you can't do any of this unless it's something health professionals, y'all make a decision on what's the best thing for your patient, but it's also about patient compliance, right? Yeah. And getting them to slowly transition to a better diet, takes time. So you need to make sure that you realize no matter what you're taking, and if you're taking anything from any prebiotic, if you take cacao, that's also polyphenols are great. Mm-hmm. Green tea. There's so many different things, but also realize that if you're just doing that half the time and then half the time Twinkies and pizza and other things, you're really just kind of you're defeating the purpose. Not to say you can't do that every once in a while, have your cheat day, but try to mitigate it like as much as you can, because realize you're going to pay for it in one way or another. And once you have stability and your microbiome has been set, you feel it. When you do something that is not good for the microbiome, you're like, oh man, that didn't settle well. That's your body telling you that's probably hey, thanks, but no thanks, kind of deal. So listen to your body too. Everybody's a little bit different, and people do have certain, like cacao. I love cacao. It's great for you. So there's stem cells they show with high flavanol content out there. Personally, I love to drink it in our Premier coffee as an additive. However, I have a reaction to that a little bit. It doesn't settle well because everybody's microbiome is a little bit different. And even though I personally love it, I do better if I don't have much of it. I have to do very small amounts to avoid it. So dosage is dependent. And the dosage, I say what I told you, even our probiotic, even though you can't go lower than 1 on the microbiome, maybe you start lower and you can titrate up. And maybe the one probiotic here for the microbiome 18, the one capsule, that needs to be 2, just based on what you're seeing. And that's for the health professional to make that decision. And once again, I always say, get a health professional. These things, they could be way more effective if they have the other information of the testing they've done, what the history of the patient and all that. So always get a health professional or work for the health professional to make that decision. What's the right beginning dosage? And don't forget, there's also like aloe powder, which we have, which are mixed berry. We call it aloe powder mixed berry, but we don't. What really needs to be said, it's actually a prebiotic powerhouse. Yes, our probiotic capsules is a prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic formula, right? But the amount of prebiotic in there is smaller, and it's been consumed, a lot of it, to make that postbiotics. Here, you're going to get a decent dosage, not only of aloe, which has ace-mannan, that helps with immunomodulation due to changes in gut health, but also feeds the bacteria there. And you have a slew of other different prebiotics, such as grapeseed extract. It has inulin, has, I believe, a gummification. It's a FOS. It is a powerhouse of different prebiotics, and in combination with this, absolutely something that is it's an intense protocol. So you want to make sure you titrate that for sure. But I highly suggest it. It's not just aloe. It's actually a lot more than that.
It's true, yeah. And something to also note, especially on the minds of a lot of consumers and health professionals, is supporting weight loss strategies, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes overlooked is the microbiome and how that can control the metabolic state of the entire body, which we've talked about. But there are actually claims with D111 as a weight loss. And so
yes.
would you be willing to go into the
Yeah,
science
so
of that?
this has been studied in athletes to look at different weight loss aspects. I believe, I want to say that there was a study with athletes over a 12-week period that showed that it would actually help with metabolic health. And, the aspects of D111 specifically, that it will help with weight loss at the 5, which is this is the dosage here. You'll see some other D111s on the market that are at 1 billion. That's not the dosage. You need 5 billion to hit this, and it can actually increase your metabolism. They showed this in athletes, so there was a specific group, but this has been studied in this. And it's actually been studied quite a bit in athletes in general, not only for inflammation, like I said, the TNFA. And, this is looked at from elderly to kids as well.
Yeah, I think it's important, whether you're any type of performance, right? Your gut microbiome is going to really kind of be a controlling factor to how your body's able to engage in that.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of goes back to this aspect of how when the gut is balanced, you have all these other cascades upwards into the body, whether that's the brain, the cardiovascular system, just the detoxification capacity of the body that work more efficiently. So it's beautiful to know that there's options to really support efficiencies across the board. We talked about prebiotics a little bit. We do have some additional products that are prebiotic support. I think of Fermented Greens as another one, which the science around that, and just maybe a good segue actually into more topics around fermentation, because we do a lot of fermentation here at Premier. And some of our top sellers are fermented products. And so wanted to kind of get your insights and your perspective on the world of fermentation, and shout out some couple products that are your favorites.
Yeah, no, well, we can talk a little bit about the greens. And, fermentation, once again, been done for thousands of years. Probably the most famous fermentation, of course, is wine, beer, and, making different spirits. Been used for a long time. Now, that is usually yeast fermentation. Now, there's sours, and there's all kinds of different ways to do this. But fermentation in general will take a organism, give it a substrate, whatever that substrate is. Could it be the sugar, could be a plant, and it's going to eat the carbohydrate source. It also needs and that's going to give it its carbon. It also needs other nutrients. And it's going to produce either a compound. It could also biotransform certain things. It can actually literally take a compound and make it into a different. I talked about the tetrahydrocurcumin. And also break down those substances into smaller ones, right? Alongside making different beneficial compounds like glutathione as well and stuff for the human body. This has been done in yogurt. This has been done fermentation in general, butter. You can ferment pretty much anything, really. Now, always know that you do produce stuff. You got to be careful, right? You got to know doing wild type fermentation, meaning just what's in the environment. They do that a lot of times with alcohol, but you got to be careful because fermentation produces a lot of different acids and can produce other compounds. So, you want to do a controlled setting. You want to make sure that you can't produce something negative. And if you ferment, maybe it's not sterile and you have a mold in there or different bacteria that's a pathogen, can produce toxins that can hurt you. Bacillus cereus produces a heat-stable toxin, and there was a red wine extract that found its way into that red wine, and they had fermented it, and it produced that heat-stable toxin. And even after the pasteurization to get rid of the Bacillus cereus, it remained and actually led to somebody's death. So that's just an example of how you just got to be careful. And do your research on this. But and personally, like I said, I use ours. I make sure the cleaning's done. I personally have been trained though, so I have to always remember that aseptic technique. Look that up. It's very important when you're doing your own fermentation. Now, that being said, fermentation is very powerful, and it's in terms of the fermenting pickles to, in brine and high salt concentrations. I think it's a very simple way to begin. If you start doing other types of fermentation, just make sure you're doing your research or have somebody that knows to help you along with it. Now, Dr. Marshall began doing his own fermentation on different botanicals and different vitamins and minerals. So our number one seller, Max B, is basically, it's a multitude of different B vitamins that we ferment, And what we do is we have over 16 different forms we identify. If you go to most vitamins out there, you're not going to see that many forms. And why is there 16? Well, first of all, we have 3 forms of B12. We have methylcobalamin, adenosylcobalamin, and hydroxycobalamin that we produce during the fermentation. So you get the 3 active forms for the body. Then you have the B2 family of riboflavins, the B6 family. You have riboflavin 5-phosphate, riboflavin 3-phosphate diphosphate. There's all those that are present there. And you get other forms also produced, basically all the active end-chain forms that are normally produced in the gut or during the fermentation. Basically, we're kind of pre-fermenting what your gut would do for you, so you have better absorption and bioavailability. Most people, when they take our Max B, I've heard everything like, this is the most intense B vitamin I've ever taken in my entire life. You take our Max B and you mix it with our beets, which opens up the blood vessels, has that, and the beets are fermented too. I'm going to throw that out there, which reduces the sugar, increases the nitrates, and that there's a multitude of uses for it, but it helps with opening the blood vessels. Take the Max B with it, and if you want to sweeten a little bit, don't even add water, just add a little honey and mix it together. It's like a treat. The best pre-workout, or if you just need energy, I'm telling you, 20 minutes, you'll clean your whole house, period. It will happen. So it's absolutely awesome. And a lot of people our Max B is intense for some people. They can't even take it. And the way it was originally designed, too, was to take it in a water bottle and just put the dosage in it and sip it throughout the day. Personally, I take it all at once because, I love that jolt of energy, and I take that. That's how I personally do that. But you can take it, and for people that have a hard time taking that, they're just like, this is too much, sip it. Cut the dosage in half. We also have a B12. We have a melatonin. Melatonin is absolutely awesome, and they're like, what happens with melatonin? Well, you actually get some intermediate forms that are produced, and this is along with the postbiotics. So everything I'm saying, notice everything we ferment, there's postbiotics, which is good for gut health. But these other forms, such as N-acetylserotonin that we found within there, has effects on the brain alongside serotonin and melatonin. So it actually helps with jet lag and for lack of sleep, almost as good as like creatine does. So that being said, has these other beneficial compounds in there. And we have everything for liver health, gallbladder health, where we actually ferment botanicals to produce other forms. Fermented greens we talked about is a very interesting one because we took our greens, which is 60% fiber. And the problem with greens, just in general, it has that cell wall that you need. That's why we have cellulase in our digest to help break down that cell wall. Otherwise, you really can't absorb the nutrients. This is really evident in the chlorella. That's why I mentioned you have to have that breakdown of that cell wall, broken cell. Well, think of this as broken cell. And basically what it does, it releases the chlorophyll. That becomes a prebiotic for the probiotics to turn into other compounds. And you have all those vitamin and minerals readily available for you to absorb. Absolutely awesome. Great product. I always say mix that with our regular greens and you get the best of both worlds, right? So because the chlorophyll is also good for you too. There's been some studies showing chlorophyll can actually still absorb light in the intestines, so in animals. But crazy stuff, right? Never thought that would happen, but it does. Plants need to be part of your diet, period. But we're constantly trying to figure out new innovations. A lot of these are legacy products. We have fermented turmeric ginger, fermented also, what else am I missing? I'm trying to think, resveratrol, which is fermented resveratrol. I have family members that will live and die by that one, in terms of immunity and supporting fast-acting, same thing with melatonin, very fast-acting, and every time I'm sick, acutely sick, I take that resveratrol, and within a day, it's gone. So it's great. It has antiviral properties, actually good for intestinal health as well. We have a whole assortment of items, and we're continuing to look at how we innovate this. But I think fermentation needs to be part of your foods that you eat. We have other items to support you if you're not getting enough there. And then, the fermentation items that we do is very unique to us. There's other companies that do that now, but Dr. Marshall was doing this many years ago, before it was a thing. And he was really kind of ahead of his time, like I said in previous podcasts.
Yeah, I think it's always we've been so cutting edge on the fermentation story. And, I think, people are just now waking up to how much we know about fermentation and how engaged we are in that aspect of really nourishing the body. I've seen a lot of consumers and health professionals actually be able to start to consume vegetables because of fermented greens, right? Using digestive enzymes and kind of allowing almost their biome to build up tolerance to digesting those hard fibers from the fruits and the vegetables, because they're getting that exposure in a more accessible, easy to digest form, right? And I think that's important, because vegetables are important, and that might be a little bit of a shocker for some people to hear, right? But it is the aspect of how there's so many nutrients and cofactors and different enzymes and metabolites that come from vegetables, right? That, it's hard to get anywhere else, right? And so, that's the beauty of providing the body a living matrix that really supports ideal health outcomes for the individual. But also, something to kind of talk about when we're talking about microbiome health is the facet to premier quality and our premier quality standard. And we don't use excipients. And we'll probably every episode talk a little bit about this, but why if somebody's looking to incorporate microbiota strategies into their protocols with their clients, or if they're a consumer, why should they look at a supplement that is excipient free to support their gut health?
And so I want to make sure we're clear on us as a company. We are not necessarily excipient free. We use nutrient excipients, right? Because excipient is really just a compound that's used to help with the process, the manufacturing process, make it efficient. What Dr. Marshall decided not to do was not use those non-nutrient excipients, because, like I said earlier, everything you eat affects your microbiome, right? And it produces compounds from those too. So you're taking in, magnesium stearate or other items, you're fermenting those and producing things that you're absorbing. And maybe they're in very small amounts, but every little item, especially if your patient's in an acute, has acute sickness or whatever they're trying to support, you got to be very careful what that gets in there, because little things can, and everybody's different too. Somebody can be hypersensitive to that. Some people are not. We're all unique. And I got to also say that everybody's unique. So whatever strategy it is not going to be necessarily exactly the same as the other individual. But the one thing I can say is, why would you want to put something into your microbiome that is not good for your body or your microbiome itself if you're trying to support them? Why would you do that? Why would you try to, and it's really just for profit, right? It's not, there's no health benefit. Nobody's taking pills of magnesium stearate. That's not happening. So it's there for profit. And so Dr. Marshall made the decision. I'm glad he did. He's like, I'm not going to eat that. Once again, his thing was, ask yourself, would you eat it? He's not going to eat it, so he's not going to sell it, because it's going to harm the body while he's trying to support the body, and that's it's just defeating the purpose. We're going to try and transform health here. You can't do that by constantly, eating that Twinkie and then doing this other thing, right? So it's a balance. Excuse me. It's a balance of, you gotta approach this with an eye of what's going to be best for the patient. And sometimes they're like, well, it's too costly. Well, at the end of the day, you're going to pay for now, you're going to pay for later. And so you have to always remember that. And so we have taken the high road in terms of just become really experts in making clean label formulas over the last 30 years. And if you look at all our products, we avoid, magnesium stearate. We're avoiding silicon dioxide wherever we can. So it's just, and we use natural things like rice bran, or we're going to use different, maybe we use prickly pear or different items which have high fibers. They're going to benefit you in different ways. So once again, I think this is something that it's caught on about 7 years ago, but clean label. Whole companies come on, but once again, we were doing this 30 years ago.
It really is the art of our manufacturing process.
Absolutely.
That sometimes gets so easily overlooked, especially when there's so many awesome formulas to support health.
And there's a lot of loss, because when I first started, I mentioned this before, that was 20% loss when I first started, and he was okay with it. He was just, that's what it is. And because he was like, I'm not going to have he was still at his own clinic, his patients eat these things himself, or any of his practitioners that worked with us. And so, which I was amazed by, and we've gotten much better. We're with the advances of technology, the advances of using different nutrients, such as everything from MCT to gum-acacia to what I talked about earlier. It's become much, within the tolerances of what magnesium stearate is. Is it completely as good as that? Can't say that. There's a limit, but that's okay. I think we've done a pretty good job becoming more efficient with continual improvement mindset over the years.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up on this episode, because I feel that we could honestly stay on this topic.
Yeah, we could talk a lot more.
I mean, there's so many different tangents we could go down, and the importance of the microbiome can't be understated, right? Mm-hmm. We've talked about how these two products can really start to influence the environment of the gut, but is there any kind of closing thoughts or remarks that you'd like to echo for our audience today?
Yeah, I want to. It's a journey. The interesting thing is you can change your microbiome overnight, but you also have to change your mindset too, and understand what you're doing. Like, once again, don't think you have to be neurotic and change everything cold turkey. Try to take it gradually, because it won't last. And if you're out with your friends and you're having whatever fun, okay, have fun, but always remember that you need to live an overall lifestyle of have the nutrient-dense items, have the prebiotics in your diet, try to do the walking, do the simple things, and you're going to be a lot better off than you didn't. So take those steps. Take one. Just pick one. I said the beans one's a simple one. You can go get those, and you can cook them yourself. They're very cheap. Or just walk. Literally just walk. Go outside, walk around the block. That's it. Right after you eat. Just try it. Do it for a week and see what happens. And you'll feel better. You'll probably get better sleep. You'll notice your digestion's better after a meal. Especially do it if you have a big meal, because that's helps with that digestion. And then work with your practitioner. And practitioners, need support. We have a whole staff here that's been highly trained on this. So if you have any questions, please, and feel free to reach out to me too. I love this subject, as you can imagine. So we're here to help. And but take one step. That's all we ask.
Yeah. And something I'd like to echo too is just it's 80% consistency, right? And so there's this aspect where the microbiome can be kind of looked at like a muscle, mm-hmm. And if you train that with consistent good foods, biodiversity of foods, lifestyle strategies that support biodiversity, and really just a ratio of good bacteria to bad bacteria, there's a higher propensity that if you do have maybe the bad meal, or maybe you just kind of go off your diet for a couple days and then get back on it, or let's say you do come down with an illness, there's a greater level of flexibility and rebound capacity to get back to ideal health, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's kind of a learned system, right? Mm-hmm. And as with all systems in the body, if it's reinforced again and again and again, it's going to go back to where it was originally rapidly. So it doesn't have to be, we're not all perfect, right? Mm-hmm. But it is just that one step that can change your life. So
great.
Nick Labinsky, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us on today's episode of the Premier Insights or Premier Living podcast. I'm your host, William Marsh, and we'll look forward to catching you next time on our next episode.
Between the stress at the office and juggling my kids' soccer schedule, my energy was running on empty. Then, I found Premier Research Labs, and they've been trusted by health practitioners for more than 35 years. Now, I have the energy I had 10 years ago. I'm finally sleeping through the night, and with their digestive support, I've even shed a few pounds. Plus, Premier Research Labs products are made in the U.S. with top-quality natural ingredients and cutting-edge science. I found them on Amazon, but you can learn more about them if you visit prlabs.com today and start your journey to feeling your best.